Hey guys, here we have the brand new Ford Fiesta ST. It's been a little bit of a delay arriving in Australia. I think it debuted a couple of years ago now, and I think it's even been on sale in Europe for a little bit now as well. But anyway, it's finally here. Very highly anticipated model, mainly because the previous version was such a great little package. Awesome bang for your buck. So the new model has got some big boots to fill, but on paper at least, it definitely is right up there with it. The main thing you'll notice with the new model is 5 doors. So the previous, sorry about that wind, it's quite a windy day today. I've tried to find a quiet spot down here, but if there's a big gust of wind, I'll try and stop talking as it goes past. But yeah, the biggest thing you'll notice with this new model is the 5 doors. So the previous model was a 3-door model only. That immediately opens up the market because it makes it slightly more practical having the 4 main doors and then the hatch lid at the back. It still looks very sporty in my opinion, but it kind of discreet as well. So if you just saw this quickly drive past, you wouldn't immediately know that it's the ST unless you're a big sort of Ford fan or a hot hatch fan. It does come with 18-inch alloy wheels now, compared with the previous 17s, and you can see red painted brakes behind there. And then at the back, you've got a big rear wing, which is not featured on normal Fiesta models, and then a little twin outlet exhaust and diffuser area. It looks great. If anything, in my opinion, I think the older model looked a bit more sort of prominent because it was a 3-door. It looks a bit fatter and wider, whereas this new model looks, I don't know, a little bit more sort of taller and skinnier. But you know, getting down low at the back here, it does have these nice rear haunches and sort of fat stance from the back. Just from some angles, it looks kind of tall. I love the little cutaway in the roof there. You can kind of see it's pretty discreet, but it sort of joins up with the rear spoiler. Under the bonnet is also a massive change. I'll just pop the hood. So that is a 1.5 litre 3-cylinder engine, turbocharged. And you might think 3 cylinders, that's not enough, but it really is. When you go out for a drive, you will not miss the 4th cylinder. The only thing I do notice is a bit of a gust of wind, sorry, it is quite rough when you're idling and in the low RPM ranges. But once you get it going, it sounds pretty much the same as the old model, even sportier actually, and definitely a lot more character to it. Despite its petite size, it produces 147 kilowatts at 6,000 RPM, which was the same as the previous model's 1.6 turbo. During overboost, it produced 147 kilowatts at 5,700 RPM. This engine also produces 290 newton meters of torque between 1,600 and 4,000 RPM. That's the same as the old 1.6 turbo during overboost. During regular driving, it produced 240 newton meters. I did do a few 0 to 100 runs, actually did quite a lot the other day for our normal 0 to 100 video. The problem was it does wheel spin quite a bit. It does wear Michelin Pilot Sport 4 tyres, which are great, but yeah, just it loves to spin away the power. There is a launch control function for this new model, which is standard in Australia. I think it's the performance pack overseas, but it's standard in Australia. There's also a Quaife mechanical limited slip differential, torque vectoring, and active torque steer compensation. All pretty high-tech stuff for a little package like this. I'll try and do a 0 to 100 run for you today. But again, it takes a lot of finessing to manage the clutch and manage the wheel spin to get a great time. I'll probably just use the standard launch control function for you just to show you as a demonstration. Anyway, let's check out the interior. Before we get in, I want to show you this cool little feature. So check out these little pads that pop out discreetly from the doors each time you open the door. But they're made from rubber, and what they do is protect the edge of the door there when you're in tight car parking spaces. I think that's a really clever, almost Skoda level of innovation from Ford. They're actually on the back as well. And they just pop back in very discreetly. It doesn't ruin the design of the car when you're driving along. I think that's an awesome feature. I think Ford should apply it to many of its models, especially the Fiesta range. You know, these are known as sort of city cars, always parking in tight little spots. I think that's a handy little feature. Owners of the previous model will immediately notice this door gap is much narrower. That's mainly because this is now a 5-door model. Previous 3-door model had longer doors that probably went to about here, and the pillar was about there too. So that gave you that more wide and open space to get in and out of. My neighbor actually had a previous gen Fiesta ST for a few years, and I got his comments on what he thought of this new model. And one of the first things he said was, yeah, there is 5 doors, which is awesome. You can get people in and out of the back, much more convenient. However, he reckons that once you're in, the perception of space is actually a little bit tighter, especially, well, mainly in the front, because of that pillar right there. So when you're in, even though the pillar doesn't intrude on your space, you know, it's not pushing your shoulder or anything like that, it just has that perception where you're a bit more confined and a bit tighter packed in here. Aside from that though, it's still a very practical space. Well, it's not still it is practical. It's not that it's ruined the practicality. If anything, it's more practical because it's got rear doors. But yeah, just that sort of perception of space is different. He also highlighted the fact that this model feels a bit more premium, a bit more better quality. So he said the dash trim and so on, there was soft dash trim, especially on the top here. He said it was a bit softer, but there was a lot more scratchy plastics and stuff lower down on the old model, I mean. So this new model still does have scratchy plastics, and in my opinion, you know, it's still quite a sort of budget spec car, which the Fiesta is, so that you can't really complain about that. But yeah, there's a little carbon fiber touch here, or carbon fiber look styles trim. Nice leather wrapped handbrake cover, nice leather wrapped steering wheel as well. ST badge. It feels as premium as you'd expect this market segment to be. I like that Ford has tidied up the dash a fair bit. So the previous model, as I said, I haven't driven it since 2013, I think it was. That's quite a few years ago now. But I remember there was this big protruding section of the dash that had a lot of buttons on it, a lot of weird, awkward shaped buttons as well, a lot of triangles and so on, whereas this is much more tidy. And then you've got this climate control panel down separate below. That's awesome. So you can easily just adjust things without actually having to, you know, hunt around. And it's got this latest touchscreen system up on the dash running Sync 3. We'll start it up, push button start with this model. It does have stop start as well, which you can turn on and off. And then, yeah, the new Sync, or the latest Sync 3 system from Ford. Climate control, single zone climate control, which is fine in a car like this. I don't think, you know, dual zone is really needed. It's not really going to make much difference being such a small volume cabin. Having hot air coming out there and cold air coming out here, it's just going to combine anyway. In Australia, this comes with a B&O 10-speaker premium sound system. Awesome sound system. I think it's definitely better than the previous Sony system, mainly because it's got more speakers. But yeah, definitely kicks out the tunes really, really nicely. I'm not a huge fan of Ford's sync system, mainly because it seems a bit sort of one-dimensional or two-dimensional. It's not, it doesn't have the depth of the other systems out there, but it does come with everything. So Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, you've got vehicle settings that you can play around with. It's all pretty easy to operate as well. You've got these main menus along the bottom, and then separate volume control, which is awesome, and skip track and so on. Change the bass levels and whatnot. But yeah, I think it does just fine. It's just not at the top of the class. I think Mazda's system is probably at the top of the class for the non-premium market at the moment. I'm not sure if you can hear the engine, but it's just sort of purring away and popping away there in the background. And I think that's where you'll notice the difference between the four-cylinder the most. So in low RPM, it's quite rough. It's actually got this turbo wastegate sound too. Got this little whistle. It's pretty cool. But yeah, low in the RPM, it's quite gruff and rough. But once you get up and going, it's fine. You do get used to it as well, and it actually adds to the character of the car. In terms of space and sort of practicality, there's this spot for your phone, although it's not quite rectangular, so your phone kind of sits awkwardly. 2 cup holders, little spot for your keys, and a center console box there. And it does have the handles that fall through to the bottom, a little pet peeve of mine. I like them when they're sealed off so you can put things in without dropping it through to the bottom. It's no big deal though. And then a little box there as well. But yeah, lots of little knickknacks. You've even got headlight adjustment, so you can change the angle of the headlights, the display brightness, which is great. Some cars you can't even change the display brightness, and other cars you got to really look for the control to do that. Whereas Ford's just put it right there, which is great. And yeah, everything else, the driving position feels quite nice. I can get myself set up into a good position. Plenty of adjustment from the steering column, up and down, forward and back, whatever you want to call it. Rake and reach. But yeah, it all feels quite nice, and definitely a good little office for a driving enthusiast. Visibility is also great. Out the back, it's a bit sort of more claustrophobic, especially that rear pillar there. They put this tiny little triangular window there, which, I don't know, I guess it helps better than having it just a full block of paneling. Lets in a bit of light as well. But in the front, definitely great visibility. I don't feel claustrophobic. I don't feel like I can't see what's going on around me. The windscreen drops right down as well, and I can actually jack the seat up even higher and get a really high up view if that's your thing. There is a little window in the side there, which you can't, it doesn't do much in terms of what you can see out of there, but if for some reason there's something hidden behind there, you will see it through there. So you'll see that there's something there. You won't be able to make out what it is exactly, but you'll at least see that there's something there. What is better though is the way this pillar wraps round high and then has a little kink there. So you can actually see straight over the mirror. There's no sort of nervousness about, worrying what's behind there when you're coming out of an intersection or something like that. I can clearly see straight over the top of that mirror, no problems. Let's check out the back seat. The seat is actually contoured to look a bit like the front, which is a nice little touch. So leather on the outside and then this sort of suede Alcantara stuff in the middle to give you a bit of grip. The seat, the backrest does sort of push you forward a little bit. It's not reclined quite enough to be, really comfortable, but this is a compact car. It's not meant to be a large sedan. The seat cushioning is pretty good though. It's nice and soft. The sort of bottom piece there, it actually feels pretty comfortable. But yeah, the backrest is just a bit firm. It does have these headrests which you can extend to give you sort of whiplash protection, but also a bit more comfort. You've got map pockets, or whatever they're called, little pockets in the back here on both sides, which is great. And a little spot for someone's phone, or 2 phones in there even. But no climate vents. Again, this is a pretty small cabin, so there's probably no need to have climate vents in the back. Although, in Australia it does get pretty hot during the summertime, so even just one vent there would be handy, I guess. But yeah, you're not too far away from the front vents anyway. I think it can probably get away with it. There are bottle holders in the doors. They actually look a little bit better than the ones in the front because they're just upright and you can get a nice big bottle in there, and then some speakers as well. All of this is scratchy plastic, no other way of putting it. There is a little pad there for your elbow, but everything else is sort of hard plastic. Check out the boot. I'll flash up the exact volume of the boot compared with the old model, but I think it's about the same. I could be wrong, but it's still very practical. Got these little holders there. I don't know what that's for, maybe an umbrella or whatever. Actually, it wouldn't be an umbrella, but space saver spare wheel under the floor, and another little strap there to hold things in. You can remove the parcel shelf, obviously, and put the seats down as well, give you a bit of extra space. There is a big step there when you put the seat down, but yeah, overall great practicality. You could use this every day, no problem at all. And there you go, you can hear that little exhaust popping and spluttering away. Let's take it for a drive and see how it goes. Once you're out on the road, it's pretty much as easy to drive as a normal Fiesta, except you get this definite underlying sense, well, it's not even underlying, it's very obvious that this car wants to go and wants to take on some corners. And part of that is due to the new steering rack. So Ford says it's using 12:1 gearing ratio, which is apparently the quickest steering rack fitted to any Ford performance vehicle. So the company says. It's also 14% quicker than the previous steering rack in the previous Fiesta ST. And that basically means you don't need to make much of an adjustment to the steering to cause a reaction. You know, you only need to make fine little inputs and the car will just dart around the corner. Also helping with that feeling of agility and energy is the firm suspension. It's not super firm. I've driven hot hatches that are definitely you know, bone jarring compared to this. I do have it in the normal driving mode, and this road is very, very coarse. It's got all little potholes and all sorts of things all over it. I would say it's more than acceptable for a hot hatch, whereas some people, they might get in this and find that it's a bit too firm for a comfortable drive. It's a nice gear stick throw. When you first look at it, it looks kind of stubby and fiddly, but it actually feels quite nice and rubbery. For a front-wheel drive setup anyway, the gearbox is actually under the bonnet in a horizontally opposed or east-west mounted engine. So there are sort of connecting rods and so on. The gearbox isn't actually under there. It's got to go through a series of rods. It feels pretty good. It feels doesn't feel notchy. You never miss a gear either. It just wants to go straight into the next gear that you want. If there's anything that is a bit strange, it's these tiny little pedals. They're really, really small. They feel like you're dancing like on I don't know, something really delicate and fidgety. But if you don't look at the pedals, they don't feel too bad. They do have these rubber studs over them and little rubber sections. So there's no grip issues or anything like that. It's just when you look at them, they're quite small and fidgety. The brake pedal is probably the sort of the main concern, because you can easily slip off that or miss it, although you can do left foot braking pretty well. How about that powertrain? Well, when you're driving along the highway, I'm going about 110 kilometers an hour, and it's revving at 2,500 RPM. That's pretty good cruising for a little car like this. It does have a 6-speed manual, obviously. Like the previous model, there's no automatic option, which is good for some people, I guess. For people that don't know how to drive or can't drive a manual transmission, that's a bad thing. So it is missing out on a section of the market. But I think it's great. It makes a very interactive, very engaging drive experience. But yeah, you could easily use this as a daily commuter, even if you drive on the highway a fair bit. It's pretty quiet. It's smooth mostly on highways anyway, where there aren't too many bumps. And yeah, it's pretty relaxing. It can be relaxing. My neighbour said that the seats in his old model were pretty, you know, you start to get a bit uncomfortable after a long drive. I can't honestly tell you what I thought of the seats back with the old model. I just can't remember that far back. But these, they feel alright. I've been driving now for definitely over an hour, and I'm not uncomfortable. In saying that, you know, a taller person or someone that's bigger framed might feel a bit, well, they probably wouldn't even fit in the buckets, because they are quite aggressive buckets. Recaro seats, big huge sections for your leg to support your legs and to support your hips. You definitely don't move around, or I don't move around in them at all. They're very good at bracing you in for the corners. speaking of which, we'll head down a nice little winding road in a minute and we'll see how it handles. I'll try out the different driving modes as well. In terms of economy, I'm chewing 8 litres per 100 kilometres, which is not too bad considering I've been sort of thrashing it around. When we did our 0 to 100 test the other day, quite a few tests actually to try and get the best time. So 8 litres is not too bad. This is going to be my first proper drive. I haven't actually taken it for a good drive around some corners and so on. So yeah, I think if you get on the highway quite regularly and you know, in extended general use, I think you could get that much lower, much lower than 8 litres per 100. The official stats though are kind of strange. So the new engine chews officially on the combined cycle 6.3 litres per 100, whereas the old 1.6 consumed 6.2. However, the emissions, the combined emissions of the old one was 145 grams per kilometre, whereas this one's 143 grams per kilometre. So it is a cleaner engine in terms of emissions, but it does chew slightly more. It's an awesome little engine. Like, it feels very torquey. It definitely doesn't feel like a 3-cylinder, especially in third gear. So I'll slow down a bit. Going 60 kilometers an hour, 3,000 RPM, third gear, floor it. Hardly any turbo lag, and it just pulls. It probably doesn't sound like it is on camera, but you can really feel it in your back. It pulls along with surprising urge, like it really wants to get up and go. Let's put some mathematics or some science into the mix and see what it actually does 0 to 100 with the V-Box. This won't be our official time or anything, it's just to give you a bit of a demonstration. I'll use the launch control system as well, just so it's a bit more, I don't know, consistent, I suppose, easier to launch. And we are on public roads as well, so I can't sit there all day. I'm trying to finesse the clutch and everything to try and get a good takeoff for you, but I'll give you a bit of an idea of what it can do in the real world. Okay, so I've got the V-Box on the outside there. I've got the car programmed into the official V-Box app. We're ready to go there. I'll put it into race mode, which also disengages the stability systems and everything for a good takeoff. And I might just start from this side of the road here and then go back onto the road. It is a nice, well, it's a pretty grippy surface, but just for safety reasons, I'll start here because, as I said, it is a public road. It is a 100 km/h speed limit zone, if you're wondering. Okay, so launch control, you just hit OK, and then we'll hit start on the V-Box, put it into gear. Might just wait for this car to go past. And then it's just a matter of nailing the throttle, and it'll hold the revs, and you just release the clutch slowly. You don't just drop the clutch, but let's see how we go. Holds it there. No cars. Third gear. It does require a third gear shift to hit 100, but let's pull over and see what it did. Okay, so that looks like it's done. 7.21. That's pretty good for the real world. If I sat there all day and kept testing it, I'm sure I could get it down lower. We did get lower than that the other day. I won't tell you the time. I'll save that for our full video. But I will tell you this, that it's better to use if you kind of not know what you're doing. I don't mean to sound like I've got a big head or something like that, but if you're pretty good with a manual transmission, I have found that it's quicker to do it yourself rather than rely on the launch control, because it does cut the power a little bit, or sorry, hit the brakes a little bit, and either way it's slowing you down a little bit to try and maximize the traction. Whereas if you use the clutch yourself, you can kind of ride the clutch out, manage the wheel spin with the throttle rather than, you know, relying on the brakes to be applied. But anyway, we got a quicker time without launch control. But 7.21 in the real world is certainly not too shabby at all. Okay, let's hit some corners now and see how it goes, because that's what this car's about, having fun in the corners. It's natural habitat. Let's see how it goes. So I've still got it in the race mode, so that means the stability is turned off, and we can rely on the torque vectoring, the Quaife limited slip differential, and the torque steer compensation. I find there still is some torque steer with this car, but it's kind of like tram lining as well. So if you apply power over some bumps, it'll sort of tug and pull at the wheel, and sort of change direction of the car, which means you do have to wrestle with it a bit, which is, again, that's hot hatch sort of characteristics, and that's what you want, that engagement. Brakes work well. Again, that lightweight nature of the car means it doesn't need massive brakes. Definitely feels really fast when you're going down the hill, because it doesn't have to work against gravity, obviously. And bangs from the exhaust. It's got all the makings of an excellent hot hatch. Back down to second. Yeah, awesome fun, awesome fun. I could sit here and do this all day. Okay, we'll go back up the hill now. Still feels like it's got plenty of torque. I'm in fourth gear. I'm only resting on the throttle, and it does want to keep going. I guess if I slow right down, 2,500 RPM, fourth gear. Yeah, it's picking up. It's not doing too bad. But yeah, shift down again, you've got plenty of grunt right there. That's full throttle. The limited slip diff really sorting out the torque distribution. Again, full throttle. Plenty of torque coming back up the hill in third. Great communication through the steering wheel as well. I've definitely got plenty of sensitivity there to understand what the front tyres are doing. It doesn't feel like it ever wants to understeer. If anything, if I turn in sharp enough, I have seen it kick out to oversteer. If you really jab it in really sharply, it'll kick the back around, which is really nice. With it in race mode anyway, with the stability turned off or wind down. I'm not sure. I'll flash up the exact what it does with it in race mode. I don't know if it's completely off or if it goes into a sort of race setting that allows some slip. But either way, it definitely allows some slip, that's for sure. Yeah, you really can just use third gear or leave it in third gear, and it provides plenty of speed, but at the same time an underdrive, if you like, for torque, a low end pickup. So this is a pretty tight hairpin, but third gear, drop down to 2,500 RPM, still picking up just great, and it is quite steep. Probably doesn't show it on camera, but it is a steep hill. So is it any better than the previous model? Well, the bar was set very high to begin with, and I think that's probably the main problem with this car. It's not really a problem, but it just means that it has to be better. How much better does it have to be, you know, to stand out? Well, having the extra 2 doors here definitely helps. I forgot to mention the actual legroom and headroom actually. Once you're in here, it's totally fine. My head isn't touching the ceiling, and I've got decent legroom for this market segment. But having the doors there definitely adds the practicality, so you don't have to worry about sliding the seat forward, which can get annoying if you're regularly carrying people in the back. So that's definitely a positive thing. I think it sounds great, this new engine, but whatever way you look at it, it has dropped a cylinder, which will probably be seen as a negative thing to some enthusiasts. Not all. I think this engine's great. It produces pretty much more power and torque than the previous model without the overboost. If you compare it without overboost, I mean. So there's no complaints there from me, but it is a bit rough. So people that are not used to 3-cylinder engines, they're going to be a little bit thrown off by that sort of rough sound, especially low in the RPM. The fact that it chews more fuel than the previous model, it's only a fraction more, but that is a genuine, it's a legitimate negative thing. Cars usually, when they evolve, you know, the companies refine the engine for better economy. I mean, the emissions, there's fewer emissions emitted from the exhaust of this car, which is definitely a positive thing. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen the economy brought down, the official rating for the economy brought down a little bit. It should be chewing maybe 5.7 or something like that for this size engine. Other than that though, this is again an outstanding little car. I think it's just moved the bar up just that little bit compared with the previous model in most areas. Pretty much all areas really, apart from engine smoothness, I guess, if that is even a factor. But yeah, pretty much every area is just moved up just a little notch. It's lots of fun to drive. It feels really fast and powerful, even when you're just cruising along. And it's still very practical. You can use it every day. Even more practical with the 2 doors at the back. The last point is the price has climbed. So it used to be about $27,000 to $28,000 manufacturer's list price, whereas now it's around $31,000 to $32,000 Australian manufacturer's list price. So it has jumped up quite a bit. We will be putting together our usual written review, and I'll go over more of the details and specs and so on, all the sort of brochure type stuff that I can't remember off the top of my head now. I don't read off a script, as you probably can tell. But yeah, I'll go over more of those details and compare a bit with the previous model as well where needed, and we'll do our usual, or we'll post our usual 0 to 100 video for you. In the meantime, thanks for watching.